Alright, I have a few things to apologize for. First of all, I have another issue with my throat. In case anyone's kind of curious, that's kind of an ongoing thing. It tends to happen for various reasons, especially whenever I get sick or whatnot, and so I apologize if my throat is bad tonight. Second thing, I'm on a different headset. I don't know if you noticed that. That's because I forgot mine at home, so I hope the quality is at least acceptable. My friend kindly lent me this one, actually for unrelated reasons, but whatever, that worked out. So I apologize for that. The next thing I'm going to apologize for is the fact that I'm going to go ahead and stop doing my game reviews for the time being. I do intend to get back to them. This is not me, throwing in my towel or whatever. But I am going to go ahead and just do the Q&A for now, which doesn't take that much time, and if I do it quickly enough and the questions stop coming or whatever reason, will not be that much of a time investor. The reason for doing this is because of a project I really want to get working on and finished. I was actually hoping to have it finished before Diablo 3 came out. And speaking of which, to address that concern right now, no, this is not me saying I want to go play Diablo 3. In actual fact, due to real life concerns, I am nowhere in Diablo 3. I just finished Act 1 tonight for the first time. Just, and before you're like, oh, that's because the servers are down. No, I haven't had that problem because the servers are up when I'm up. I do sympathize, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying I haven't been playing it that much. That's the reality of it. So, my highest character is like level 15 or whatever at this point. Nothing. Bottom line is I do apologize for all these many things, but I am going to go ahead and do the Q&A tonight. I might cut it off and split it into multiple videos depending on how long this runs. I, as usual, have far more questions than I thought I would. I also apologize. This is again not sorted. I'm sorry, that's another good reason to chop them up a bit more so people can find their questions easier for anyone who doesn't want to listen to me ramble on for 2 hours. So I'm going to go ahead and get to the Q&A. For anyone who's curious, since this question might be asked, I'll go ahead and answer it right now. When I do start doing the reviews again, yes, I'm going to make up the time I lost. So, at the bare minimum, I'm probably going to be doing 2, maybe 3 reviews, depends on how long this takes me to push through. But I am going to be doing Baldur's Gate 2 first, and Warcraft 3, and a few others. Actually, I have the list right here. If you give me just one moment here. Alright, so I'm sorry, I'm going to be doing KOTOR next, and then Warcraft 3, and then Baldur's Gate 2, and I probably will do all those within one bundle, like within one night or whatever. It's going to be like a whole night of reviewing. But either way, after that, we'll see what happens. The next most requested thing would be the Final Fantasy series in its entirety. And then the Half-Life series and the Diablo series. So we'll see. We'll see what happens by then. But let's go ahead and get to the Q&A and get this started. Okay. Someone was asking. A lot of these I had to abbreviate, by the way. I'd get multi-page statements and then and then a question. And so I did actually read your whole post, is what I'm saying, for anyone who did that. I'm just responding to the part that is actually the question. We need to turn the visual down. There we go. So, do I think that the extended DLC cut is going to fix the ending controversy, or is it going to stir up the firestorm again? Honestly, I'm trying really hard not to place bets on that, because, it could go well or it could go terribly. I'm really not sure. It really depends on exactly what they do with it, but in my opinion, in my personal opinion, I don't think it's going to fix the problem. I don't think it's going to end the controversy. I just think it's going to die down over time, as it has a tendency to do anyways. And I personally don't have my hopes up very high for anything to come of that. Could I do a review of the Batman Arkham games? I'd like to do that. I'd also like to play those games. I own them. I just have never gotten the time to play them. So that is on the list, though. I'll put those on the list. Will you do a Morrowind review? Yes, I'd love to do a Morrowind review. Will you do an Oblivion review? Yes, I'd love to do an Oblivion review. I'm not going to do a Daggerfall review, which is as far back as I'd go, because it's been too long, and all I could really talk about is its contributions and how I felt about it at the time. I can't go back and play Daggerfall right now in order to get a modern viewpoint on it. I might do like a commentary on it, something like that. Will I do a review of Breath of Fire 4? No, I will not, but that's only because I haven't played Breath of Fire 4 yet. I own it. Yes, really. So that's, again, something that's kind of on the list. What is my opinion on the idea of a Darkspawn party member for Dragon Age 3? Interesting one, and one that there is some background laid down. There is lore reasons for that to be possible. There are plenty of Darkspawn who are sentient, who are, self-aware, who are capable of thinking and acting on their own and are not just mindless killing machines. So it's possible. It depends on what the real threat is. As I mentioned, it is my theory that there will be a real threat in Dragon Age 3. And as someone pointed out, which I don't remember if this is in the questions or not, that there was a flaw in my thinking, assuming Dragon Age 3 is a trilogy rather than going on to a quadrilogy, and that's true. And I'm going to continue thinking that because I haven't heard anything about it Dragon Age 4, but it is very possible that they will keep going rather than ending it with 3. So we'll see. Either way, whatever the bigger threat is, regardless of the Mage Templar War, whatever's the real problem going on there, assuming there is one, that is very possible to have the Darkspawn join you. It'd be interesting if they pull it off properly. Have I ever played Brave Fencer Musashi for the original PlayStation? Yes, I have. I don't remember it much. It was a rental, and I never ended up buying it, although it was really fun and enjoyable, so, I have nothing bad to say about it. I do recommend it to anybody who was interested in picking it up. What rank am I on StarCraft 2? I have no idea. I think I technically don't have a rank at this point, because I haven't played in so long. I only got up to, I can't think of what it was actually right now. I played it basically when it came out. I played it quite a bit when it came out, and a friend of a friend was constantly criticizing me, who was very good, and I give him props for that, but he was not encouraging me. He was not actually teaching me. He was just telling me I was doing it wrong, and I never actually learned from that, obviously. I just had to learn on my own, and that never went anywhere, and finally I decided, you know what, I could be competitive, but I don't really have time for this, so I just kind of let it fall to the side. Someone asked me what are the other 3 animes I liked. I was debating if I wanted to answer this question or not, because this is just going to be weird, but the other animes, I like Death Note, I like Hellsing, and I like Azumanga Daioh. Yes, really. And the other one, the last one, this is a sort of. I sort of like Bleach. It depends. I don't like the filler. I don't like some of the writing. I don't like some of the characters. I don't like some of the arcs. But some of Bleach I do enjoy. And that's it. I also want to respond to someone who said how much he disliked me saying I hate anime. I do apologize for my word choice. I don't remember if I said hate or not, but I do not hate anime. That's ridiculous. That's like, as you point out, it's like saying I hate music. No, no, no. It just, in general, anime does not interest me. And I do mean, across the board, because I've been exposed to quite a bit of it, obviously, being a part of the community I am, and having so many friends who are so very into anime of various types and various formats, or whatever you want to call it. Different target audiences, and different styles of presentation. But just it doesn't catch me in general. And those 4 I just mentioned are the only exceptions. So I don't know what to tell you. It's just my thing, or not my thing, I suppose. This person asked a question about Paradox Interactive Games. He pointed out I was talking about the games that they had published, and he's correct. He was actually asking about games like Crusader Kings 2, Europa Universalis 3, Hearts of Iron, Actually, I am familiar with those titles, and I did not mention those specifically. What I was towards the end of that answering that question, I mentioned popcorn games and how I don't consider them games I'd really enjoy. Not games I want to sink myself into, just a game I play through once, enjoy it, and move on. Hearts of Iron is actually a great example of that. I enjoyed Hearts of Iron, I just have no intention of playing it again. And so, it's not a game I would consider, absolutely amazing, but it is a game I consider worth paying for. I have no regrets there, and I am very, I really enjoy the experience, so I guess that's the best way to answer that. This gentleman asked, with regards to the last Q&A, a gentleman asked if you could be put in a fantasy if you could be put in a fantasy setting, and you had to be yourself, what would you do? And I mentioned that this is something I discussed for a lot, and that's what I called the Tier 1. Tier 3 was the fantasy setting you could put yourself in and be able to adapt to its circumstances and have some degree of control over that. And he asks, his new question is, which Tier 3 fantasy setting would I choose? The answer, and I have thought about this prior to this question being asked, is one of 3. Warcraft, in general, because I know the setting very well and I know how it works, and it's easier to escape death than it is in most settings. A lot of other reasons, and also because it is a world I could live in, if you know what I mean. You know, it is a world I could make an existence in, if that makes any sense. Make a life in, rather than just something that would be interesting to go through. You know, like I would never pick Fallout, even in the third tier setting, even in that's kind of concept, simply because it's still Fallout. I don't want to live in that setting. I don't want to enjoy that. I couldn't really make something out of that. I mean, I could make something relatively speaking, but you understand what I mean. It would either Warcraft, the Star Wars series, depending on the era. If I could choose the era, then definitely Star Wars. Or and for basically the same reasons. I know Star Wars very well. I could do a lot with it. Blah blah blah. The third reason is, and the third reason. I'm sorry. It's hard to concentrate because of the pain in my throat. The third setting I would pick would be Final Fantasy VI. And that's kind of different because that's not a very open setting, it's not a very open world, and there is a lot going on there. But to live in that world and to have access to things such as Magicite, which the third tier would allow me to do, and to be able to experience those people and those lives and those places would be something I would consider worth it enough to actually be considered for this list. So one of those three. Um, you, actually, I'm going to skip this question for now just because I think I need to actually think about it. I don't want to sit here with you watching me think for a few minutes. So we'll go ahead and put that one to the side for now. What are my thoughts on goodoldgames.com? I think it's a fantastic idea. I think lots of people should be more aware of it. That is GOG.com if you are not. It is a fantastic site that has access to a fairly large number of games. It doesn't have all of them. It doesn't have a lot of ones I would like. And every now and again I go back and check to see if they have some of the old ones that I wish they would have. But there are plenty of awesome games on there, and they're fairly cheap, and they work. So all kinds of in favor of that. I love that idea. What did I think of The Watchmen? I can't remember if that was in reference to the movie, but my comment also references the comic book. I was never that big of a fan of The Watchmen. I think it was interesting, and as an artistic work, I understand its significance, and I acknowledge that. It's one of those situations where I just didn't like it personally, if you know what I mean. So the same kind of problem with the movie, basically. The movie was interesting in its own right, and it was there, and there were some interesting stylistic, artistic choices. The severe slow-mo effects that they kept using were unusual, and I get where they were going with that. I get what they were trying to pull across visually, and they succeeded. It was just interesting to watch, and it never really caught me. I only watched it the one time in the theaters and then moved on. Um, Someone mentioned that I like Top Gear and asked if I ever did a lap of the test track, like in in Gran Turismo 5 or Forza 4 in the car they use on the show, and if so, what was your time? Now, yes, I have a lot actually, with a lot of cars that they've used on the show. The problem here is anytime I could give you, obviously I don't remember any of them. I did the Lotus Elise. I got down to sub-minute on that, as in sub-minute time. But A, it's not that realistic because, you know, it's still a video game. But B, and more importantly, in Gran Turismo 5, for example, it's a rolling start. Which may not mean a lot to some of you, but a rolling start is automatically going to be completely different than a static start, and it's difficult to the point of irritating to emulate a static start within that particular game. It's not an option. You can't do that. So any time I would have in comparison is basically meaningless. So it was more like me and my friends would compare times to each other with the same cars based on with that track. Give your thoughts on League of Legends, if not a review. I'm not going to do a full review of League of Legends just because I don't play it myself, but I will tell you my thoughts on it in brief, if you'll give me a moment. Oh, goodness. The I don't remember if I've mentioned this on my reviews anywhere, but my thoughts on something like Team Fortress 2, which is what I use as the example. StarCraft 2 is another excellent example here. Competitive gameplay like that is something I do get into, and I used to be very good at and enjoyed, but as long as it was in good fun, as long as I never got too serious about it, if you know what I mean, because I don't want to ruin someone's day. League of Legends was the kind of thing, and Dota, by the way, back when Dota was first coming out, I was very good at it and very big on it. League of Legends is the kind of thing that I might have gotten in if I'd gotten into the ground floor, but League of Legends, as all such games like it, has the same problem they all have, and that problem is, if you want to get into League of Legends or Team Fortress 2 or whatever right now, League of Legends is especially bad about this though. You hop in there and you are a noob, and there's no avoiding that. You don't know what's going on, you don't know the tricks, you don't know how exactly to, uh, I don't even remember the terms right now, to feed, I think. I can't remember the terms, but the point is that just emphasizes my point anymore, doesn't it? You know, you don't know what you're doing, and it comes off. And the people in League of Legends, in general, this actually probably more like a 50%, but the people who are going to be talking generally are not tolerant of noobs, and so you're going to feel unwanted, and it's going to be an unpleasant environment until you get good at it. And so you either have to deal with putting up with that noob period in order to get to the point where you can actually enjoy the game, because nobody wants to play with a noob, basically. Not nobody, that's an exaggeration, but you get the point. Or don't bother, basically, because yeah, there's nothing for it. Now, that's not a problem with the game itself, and quite the contrary. I think League of Legends is a great game. It's just a natural artifact of a competitive gameplay like that. It happens in every game that does that, and there's no avoiding it. So, oh well. It's one of the things that it's better to get in on the ground floor, in my opinion. Now, I got like 7 people asking about the Xbox thing. I'm actually going to put that back a little bit. I will answer that question. But the next game, if I could have one proper remake of Final Fantasy VI or Chrono Trigger, which would I choose? Now, this is amusing because I would choose Final Fantasy VI, but the reason it's amusing is because there already has been a good Chrono Trigger remake, the one on the DS, which I do highly recommend to anybody who has access to that. It was they didn't change, they didn't turn the game into a completely different engine per se, like say Final Fantasy IV did when going to the DS, but they did actually rewrite the combat engine in order to increase the smoothness and decrease the delay of it. They polished the graphics just a little bit, but just noticeably. The music was polished. There was a lot of extra content added, and all the dialogue was basically rewritten from ground up. So, very good remake. I definitely recommend it. Next question, asking about Vindictus. I don't know how many of you have heard of that. I actually have played Vindictus. I guess that shouldn't be a surprise at this point. People ask, have you played this MMO? Yes. Whatever it is, yes. I have played Vindictus. It was interesting. I did actually enjoy it. It's not quite my thing. It's kind of an action MMO, if you understand what I mean. You actually swing, and there's terrain that is destructible, and you can pick up pieces of the rock and fling them at people, blah blah blah. There's all kinds of fun to go along with that, and it is actually rather enjoyable. The only catch is there was almost no meat to it. The story was very threadbare. It was just, go and have fun doing some dungeons for a while with a couple of friends, and that was interesting, but not as fun as I would like, and not something I would devote full time to. Again, a popcorn game, basically, as I like to call it. Not a bad thing. That's not an insult. I just feel like pointing out, in case anybody thinks I'm insulting any game I call a popcorn game. No, no, no. That is a compliment. It's just comparing a popcorn game to a full steak and T-bone game is different. It's a different thing. Also, the region restrictions on Vindictus are a little irritating, but let's just move on from that and not talk about that. Have you played Darksiders? Yes, I have. Did I like it? Yes, I did a lot. I actually would like to finish it sometime because I never actually did, but I thought Darksiders was fantastic. It was a very interesting combination of like Zelda and Devil May Cry and just a little bit of God of War in there. But surprisingly, it really worked out really well. The design for the levels was interesting and engaging. The combat was fantastic. I loved it. And Darksiders is another of those games, in my opinion, that hit that balance point. I talked about that in my Diablo 3 review, of being overpowered, but not being too overpowered, but not being too weak. There is a degree of skill involved, but that's fine. I like that. I prefer a game like Devil May Cry where I have to actually, do things myself rather than hitting attack over and over and the combo does its own thing, if you know what I mean. So I like Darksiders a lot, and I do recommend it again to anybody who could pick it up. I am very much looking forward to the sequel, which I'm actually not 100% sure is out yet or not, as sad as that sounds, but I'm still looking forward to it, and I'm still going to buy it whenever it comes out, if it's not out already. I bought it on the PC, by the way, for anyone who's curious. As usual, PC tends to get priority for me, for many reasons. I mentioned Drakensang. Did I mean? I meant the browser game. This gentleman is asking if I meant the browser game or the single-player RPG. I was referring to the browser game in my comments there. Did I buy Dark Souls or Demon's Souls? No, I have not. I never bought either game. Again, games that never really caught me with interest, and they're on the PS3, or at least Demon's Souls is on the PS3. So, as always, any game that is console is more difficult to justify a purchase for me because playing a console game is more difficult than a PC game for me, based on my real life scenario. Again, no avoiding it. Just time concerns. Do you think that certain films or TV shows could be translated into a game format like Babylon 5 or a Farscape-based RPG, thus allowing the writers to continue the established universe? Yes and no. And I'm going to go ahead and read the rest of your question here real quick. If so, would you like to see more of these types of transitions take place if handled properly and with what properties? That last part of that question is why I wanted to continue there, because handled properly, that's the key right there. It is possible to take an existing intellectual property, like Star Wars or Star Trek or Farscape or whatever, and make something out of it in a video game sense. The key, in my opinion, is to realize that a video game ultimately is a different medium. And I know that sounds really obvious, but it is a different, complete presentation style. And you can't just plop the TV show or the movie show or whatever into a video game and expect it to sell. There's a reason why so many video games that are based on movies are terrible, and vice versa, I might add, because people don't take into consideration the different medium. Video game movies tend to be terrible, and vice versa. So the rare cases where it's actually worked is when they've approached it like a video game that happens to be set in setting blah. I mentioned in my last Q&A, and I'll be mentioning it later, the Star Trek games, adventure games way back in the early 90s. That's an excellent example of looking at a game and saying, looking at a game and saying, all right, let's make a game based on Star Trek. And so they did it, and it was, each one was basically an episode, but it worked because each episode can function as a mission, and there are multiple ways to go about it, and it functioned, and so you could do that sort of thing. You just have to do it properly. So I guess my answer overall is yes, I would like people to do that, but only if they do it properly. I would rather they do nothing than they make something bad, like, oh, I don't know, the Farscape MMO that's coming out, which I have nothing but bad feelings about for a lot of reasons. Moving on. Have I played Mount and Blade Warband? Yes, I have. If so, what do you think of the combined elements of the game, such as economics, recruitment, and mounted combat? That was the only appeal to the game for me, if that makes any sense. The graphics were a little put-offish, as weird as that is to sound. And I don't know, it felt like a rather sluggish game to me, a rather slow-paced kind of thing. But I really liked the concept. I really enjoyed the idea of running this little economic, I don't even know what to call it, kingdom, I guess, and recruiting your band and having mounted combat on a regular basis. I really enjoyed the idea as a concept. It just never flowed for me. And the combat itself, actually, I didn't enjoy. So while I wouldn't actually rate the game down, it was certainly an interesting idea, and I certainly, wish it had done more. It just kind of disappointed me, I guess. So my fault, I suppose. Oh, goodness. Have you played Hearts of Iron? Yes. If so, did you enjoy? Yes, I did. The research. Oh, I'm sorry. I just realized that my text file has been adding question marks in the middle of sentences. So let's try that again. Have you played Hearts of Iron, and if so, did you enjoy the research, economic, and military industry being able to play as any country? Yes and yes. I do like the ability to do something other than create an army and win in a 4X game like that. I really enjoy the ability to play as multiple countries which actually have differences to them in a 4X game like that, and so I think they pulled that off rather well in that. Perhaps not perfectly, but well enough, and I enjoyed it. Whoops, that's that's the fourth reiteration of the Xbox question, which I'll get back to. Within holodecks, which game do you believe would win, World of Warcraft or Pokemon? I have to assume you mean in terms of how many people would play which, in which case I think Pokemon would probably win out in the end. Because, actually, you know what, I take that back. I think they would both be tied. I honestly think there are sufficient people in both audiences that would, and in fact there are probably plenty of people who would actually play both. And so it is very feasible that, someone would hop from a Pokemon game to a World of Warcraft game. And I just point to myself as an example. I played WoW and I played Pokemon. play, present tense, so obviously I haven't played WoW in a while because I haven't had time lately, but you get the idea. So now if we're talking versus, that's actually a more interesting question, because the first thought was, oh, of course WoW's going to win, they got eldritch creatures and massive dragons and all that, but then you realize the fact that in lore, in Pokemon, you have the masters of time, space, uh, the antiverse, and technically everything within one game, by the way. Never mind the three masters of the elements, the three masters of emotion, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you've got some big names in Pokemon in lore terms, even if they don't equate to game terms. So if they're actually a versus thing, that's actually a lot closer than I'd call. I would probably still go ahead and put World of Warcraft as the winner, though, because WoW, or rather Warcraft in general, I really should stop calling it WoW, Warcraft in general, deals with creatures that can take out multiple planets and do so on a regular basis. Next question. Have I ever played Advent Rising? And if you have, would you like to see someone pick it up and run with it? Yes, I have. Only very briefly. And it would be interesting to see a company or a developer or a group or whatever take that and take that concept and actually go somewhere with it. Excuse me. And really produce something that's actually, good. I don't really have anything else to add there. Of the RTS games, have you played Supreme Commander and Sins of a Solar Empire? If so, what are your thoughts on them, and what do you think of them being put together as in its single player on the ground? Oh, okay, as single player on the ground and not in orbit, and also being in orbit in space. I have played Supreme Commander. I never got into Sins of a Solar Empire. It's on my wish list right now, and it's been sitting on my wish list for a while, partially because I've heard both good and bad things about it, so I've been waiting for a sale in order to pick that up. Supreme Commander, for example, is an interest. I like that type of RTS where scale really is done fairly well. The ability to go and go over here and have absolutely massive armies on both sides. As far as the games that do what Sins of Solar Empire do, which have ground-based combat and space-based combat at the same time, there's just extremely small number of games that have actually pulled that off. I can't even think of one right off the top of my head right now, but I love that idea, and I wish more would do that. And so if Sins of a Solar Empire pulls it off properly, that's going to be fantastic. But I wish more games would try that rather than just, all ground or all space or whatever. One of the games that did try that and only partially succeeded was Star Wars Empire at War. The space missions were awesome. The space combat was awesome. Even if though it was two-dimensional, it still worked and still was fun. The ground missions were so-so, but still enjoyable. And so, it didn't quite hit the notch right where I wanted it. If I were to ask, what is your ideal RTS that combines space and ground combat? Total Annihilation on the ground and Homeworld in space. That would be amazing. I almost cursed just now. I'm sorry. I'm in a lot of pain, and it's affecting my concentration. Next question. I would love to hear your thoughts on Capcom's increasingly negative reputation amongst its fan base and the gaming community as a whole, specifically their extensive abuse of DLC locked and their cancellation of Mega Man Legends. I feel, Mega Man Legends 3, I feel really bad for Capcom in a way. Inafune, and I do apologize to the man if I'm pronouncing his name right because I have lots of respect for him. He basically was the mind behind the Mega Man series. He was the reason that series had actual continuity with itself and was going to be a more coherent story until Capcom told him, no, do this instead. And he has actually left Capcom as of now. I don't know what he's been doing lately. This is actually kind of old news at this point. And as a result, Mega Man as a whole has kind of fallen off the face of the earth. There was going to be a Mega Man MMO, which actually looked interesting. What they were doing is it was going to be a side-scroller MMO, and that actually has potential. And I'm amazed no one else has tried that, and that's now just gone, abandoned, because, yeah. So, honestly, like I said, I have sympathy for the people who work at Capcom. I think they've been making some very bad decisions. I think the whole DLC locked thing is no, to put it simply. I do not agree with that concept. And it's I don't agree with the concept because while you can argue, pardon me, you can argue that it's no different than a DLC you have to download. That's not the problem. The problem, and this is difficult to explain, it's a respect thing. It shows a lack of respect on the behalf of the developers for the people, if that makes any sense at all. And this is really hard to explain. It feels like a technically. There we go. I'm going to say that because any of my viewers probably know what my feelings are on that. And yes, technically, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Ah, technically, it is true that what they're doing is no different than putting out DLCs that are downloadable and whatnot. But A, I disagree with that in its own ways, in its own places as well. But B, it's a technically. You are technically not doing that, but at the same time, you are pushing out a product that we can't access, that we have purchased, that we can't access all of, even though it's right here in our hands, literally. You know, so something just feels wrong about that, and it's difficult for me to describe. So I do apologize if I don't give you a detailed analysis of this one right now. But I do think Capcom deserves their negative reputation, but it is my sincere hope that they pull out of that. I am still rooting for Capcom, so we'll see. Resident Evil 6 has been showing some real promise, for example, so we'll see. Um, oh, this is I'm gonna pause for a moment and just say that I always try to be honest in these, and by try I mean succeed. I always be honest in these reviews. I always try and give my opinion, and you can take it and you can shoot me in the face for it if you want to, because this is the truth. This is how I actually feel, and I do try to clarify what I say as best as I'm able. I'm still human. I still make mistakes. I still fail at communicating. In fact, one of my questions earlier was me failing at communicating, for example. But I I always feel funny when I voice an opinion that I know is unpopular. Like, I like Diablo 3, for example. I think Diablo 3 is fantastic. I don't think it's perfect. I think it's made some mistakes, but I have been enjoying it greatly when I've been playing it. It's an amazing game. They've done so much that is correct and awesome in that. Dragon Age 2, not a great game, not a fantastic game. When compared to Dragon Age 1, it pales in comparison, but I did enjoy Dragon Age 2, and blah, blah, blah. So let me just go out in here and answer this question. The question is, what do you think about the Mists of Pandaria expansion pack for WoW? Do you think it can or will be taken seriously as other expansions? And do you think they should have done something else different, like the Demo Dream? I'm in the Mists of Pandaria beta, because I'm in every beta. And everything I've been seen has been positive so far. Everything, 100%. I am actually astonished. As I have mentioned briefly, and I have talked to my friends recent times, I think Blizzard is doing this now. They're back on the upswing. They've been making a lot of correct decisions lately. Not all of them. Always Online for Diablo 3 comes to mind. And I've mentioned why I disagree with that in a previous review. The 4-player limit has become annoying, which is almost surprising too. But let's move on. Despite their mistakes, they have still been doing overall a net positive job, in my opinion, and Mist of Pandaria is an excellent example of that. I like everything they've done in that expansion. People have been complaining about the simplification of talents, but in all honesty, looking at it from a real perspective and actually being at that point, there is no real simplification. It's more, what would you like to do right now, and picking your the difference between picking a spec and then customizing it 6 times, or picking a talent tree and customizing it, say, maybe 3 times, is less than you would think. And I know people like to have the options, and I understand the concept of wanting to pick the talents yourself, but ultimately you aren't losing out anything, if you understand what I mean. And I should just stop here, because I don't want to get into this big debate about defending Mist of Pandaria. So let me just summarize. I like it. I am buying it. I do enjoy what they see. I like the little Pokemon battles. That's just a fun little thing for fun. There's no real benefit there. It's just have fun with it. I like that. I like the new PvP areas they've been showing. I love the new quest design, the single player, the person specific layering technology they've really implemented ever since the Firelands raid, and they've really been putting into every single quest and every single instance in Pandaria. Works beautifully, and really makes the game feel much more cinematic, and allows them to do more dialogue, more story, more lore, which I love. And the new areas are gorgeous, visually impressive in every way, and the fact that they're pandas doesn't bother me at all. It really doesn't. There's actually a rather interesting and well built up background and lore to that, and you discover that as you go through there. So I'm with it, and having what is essentially an Asian themed expansion doesn't exactly bother me. I'm with it. I enjoy it. It's wonderful. So I apologize for rambling on a bit, but I do like Mr. Pandaria, and I will freely admit that, and you may shoot me with your barbs and arrows as much as you like for my opinion, because it is still the truth. And I need to clarify that real quick. I'm not saying that Mr. Pandaria is good is the truth. What I am saying is my opinion as the truth. I'm not lying to you. So, do I ever see them remaking or porting Warcraft 3 and its content to the handheld console? No, I do not. And partially I'm kind of glad for that. The only way I personally could see an RTS of any kind working on a console is where you have something that equates to a mouse. Now, you could make the argument that that could happen on the 3DS, and actually if they did a Warcraft 3 remake on the 3DS, I'd probably buy it. But my point is, the ability of having this right here and being able to do something with it is, in my opinion, essential to an RTS. I don't know if you've ever played an RTS on a console, like the StarCraft port that came to the N64, which did terrible. It's frustrating and irritating and cumbersome, especially if you're used to playing an RTS on a PC. However, if you have something like the stylus, that could work. And so I would really like to see them do something like that. It'd be interesting. And like I said, I'd probably buy it. Have I ever heard of Nier? Yes, I have. I've heard of the fact that there's the replicant and then there's the gestalt. The multiple endings concept within the story, and would it be something I consider looking at and possibly reviewing? I probably won't do a review of Nier because I haven't played it extensively, and I only played a little bit of it at a friend's house. I don't own it. Nier is however, one of those games that I consider those hidden gems. It's not a fantastic game, it's not tier 2 here or whatever you want to call that, but it is a good game. It is enjoyable. It covers some interesting concepts, and it does some really interesting things with the gameplay, like the text-based level and the whole. You know what I'm talking about. If you know what I'm talking about, if you've played the game, you understand, and if you don't, I probably shouldn't spoil it for you. But nonetheless, I do think that it was very well done, and I do think it's interesting that they did the version exclusive copies of that. But if I were to pick that up, I'd pick that up on the PC if available. I'm actually not positive if it was ever on the PC. So, something for the wish list again. Mm, do I think a lot of the professional, quotes, reviewers, such as IGN and GameSpot, etc., only look for the next big wow and only work towards the hype machine and giving complaints that aren't always necessary and are completely trite? In my long experience of gaming, there have been several games that have been given poor and mixed reviews, such as, things that are cult classics or, diamonds in the rough. I do tend to think that the bigger game companies tend to focus on the games that are bigger. I don't actually blame them for that. There's very good reason for that. It's because that's where the money is. They will get more money for reviewing that, and they will get more money for advertising that than they would, and they'll get more views, which brings them more advertising money for doing that than they would if they reviewed a game that hardly anybody has known about. Nier is actually a great example of that. I had another example I was going to talk. Homeworld. I'm gonna use Homeworld as an example because Homeworld didn't get any attention nearly as much as it deserved, and that was a fantastic game. I loved that game. I can't believe that's still the only game that's done 3D RTS in a manner that I really enjoyed to date. Homeworld, the Homeworld series, all three games. So I do think the professional reviewers tend to lean more towards the money side of things, and that's unfortunate. But there's also no real way around that. So what are you going to do? What are your top 5 facepalm moments from games? Ooh. Um, I can name the number one without even thinking about it. Final Fantasy VIII. Spoiler alert. Hey, we all happen to go to the same orphanage and have been friends since we were, 3. But we all forgot about it, except him. He just didn't mention anything about it. That whole scene was the reason I disliked Final Fantasy VIII for a while. It wasn't until many years later I went back and gave that game an honest shot and realized that it was actually a good game. It's just that scene and some of the problems with the plot bothered me so badly. Also, I wanted to smack Squall a lot, and Renoa. But that scene was just, oh my god, really? Second moment, Mass Effect 3's ending. I'm sure all of you saw that coming, but in all honesty, it deserves probably the number 2 slot for what it did. That was just, oh my god levels, as I've discussed over and over and over in 5 other videos, so let's just move on from that. Third moment, that's a tough one. If I had to actually sit down and pick, I would go ahead and say the Atlantica scene in Kingdom Hearts 2. Kingdom Hearts 2 is probably, arguably, one of my favorites of that series. Actually, Birth by Sleep would probably be my favorite, but Kingdom Hearts 2 would be my second favorite of the Kingdom Hearts series. a series which I enjoy very much. And in the middle of what is an engaging and interesting plot that has taken a very dark turn and a very serious turn from the first game, and, you know, amidst all the intrigue and amidst all the interest and amidst all that, we go to Atlantica and play in a musical. And I'm not a fan of musicals in general, so that was problem one. And problem two was it was finny fun is all I have to say to that. Anybody who's heard that song, I have whenever I replay Kingdom Hearts 2, as I did somewhat recently a few months ago, I have to mute the game when I go through that section and just because you have to do it in order to get the last Orichalcum Plus for the ultimate weapon. You have to do Atlantica for that reason. Otherwise, I just skip it. But so that'd be number 3, I think. Yes, that's what we're up to. Number 3 there. The laughing scene in FF10 is the one the actual question poser mentioned. I think I'm going to go ahead and put that in the top 5 there because that was just in a very serious game, in a very interesting game, in a game that has incredible depth and complexity to its plot and its themes. All of a sudden, Tidus and Yuna are laughing in the most fake, horrible way, and I can just picture the actors sitting there like, oh, I have to do a third take of the laughing scene because it wasn't fake enough sounding. You know, I feel so bad for those people. And I can't come up with a 5 right off the top of my head, so I apologize, but those are my top 4 facepalm moments from video games. Actually, you know what? Number 5. Killing Han and Chewie in Force Unleashed 2. Moving on. Have I ever played the classic LucasArts and Sierra... Oh, God, goodness, yes. Have I played the classic LucasArts and Sierra point-and-click adventures, such as Monkey Island series and Space Quest? Yes, I have. They were fantastic games. I highly recommend. If you can find a copy of them, like on GOG.com or anything like that, I strongly recommend you go pick them up. They're simple, they're basic, they have the adventure logic problem that all adventure games have. However, they're very enjoyable, they're very funny, they're very engaging, even now. And that was the golden era of adventure gaming by far, and LucasArts was definitely on top of that heap, I think, which is kind of funny when you think about it now. So, yes, awesomeness. Why don't you own an Xbox? Isn't that like the 6th repetition of that? I am getting to answering that, I swear. Have I ever owned a Sega console, and do you think they'll ever release another one in the future? I did own a Genesis. A Genesis, actually, I should say, a Genesis was given to me. I never went out to purchase one. I never would have, because of the reasons that I'll get into when I talk about the Xbox, but suffice it to say, the Genesis had 3 games on it, I think, for me. Something like that. Not very many. And so, you know, that's not enough, in other words. Do you have any friends who actually liked the Mass Effect 3 ending, and what was the reason for liking it? No, I do not have any friends of my many friends, you know, about 15-ish, who most of which have played Mass Effect 3, and none of which liked it. So I guess I can't answer the second part of that, which is, were you able to convince them of your ways? No, because they agreed with me to begin with. Have you seen the Red Letter Media's reviews of the Star Wars prequels, and do you agree or disagree with their critiques? No, I have not. I try not to watch that kind of thing in general, as weird as that's going to sound. You know, Sci-Fi Debris I like because he's amusing, and I enjoy watching Yahtzee's reviews because he's amusing. But it's a rare thing that I find a critique thing like that either interesting or amusing. I tend to just do my own, as you're probably aware. And so, you know, that's what I do. So I've never actually watched them. I have no idea what their thoughts are on the matter. I imagine they bashed the prequels. I do defend the prequels, but only to an extent. I think the prequels could have been fixed with 3 changes. 3 little changes, and I think they could have been great, but let's not get into that. Out of all 6 Elder Scrolls games, which, he's counting the MMO on this list. Of the 5 Elder Scrolls games, who do you think has the best main antagonist? Now, personally, I would actually go with Morrowind on that one. I know I tend to lean a lot towards Morrowind as one of my favorites of the series for many reasons, but the fact that, I suddenly can't think of his name, the villain from Morrowind, oh my goodness, this is going to bother me, Dagoth Ur, there we go, I knew I just had to think about it for a second, Dagoth Ur, I'm not even sure I'm pronouncing that right, not only was he intelligent and tragic and had a sympathetic backstory, but he was also insane, he was a good kind of insane, if that makes well written insane, rather than just someone writing someone off as insane to explain his behavior not making sense. No, no, no. He was twisted is actually a better word for what he was, and he had a real plan for what he's going to do over the next several dozen or hundred of years in order to pursue his goals of becoming the new deity of Tamriel, and it all made sense. It was all logical. It would have worked if you, the player, the Nerevarine, had not intervened. And when you finally reach him and talk with him amicably, he's honest with you, and I like that. So even though you only actually encounter him once, I think Dagoth Ur is probably one of the most engaging villains in the series, personally. Excuse me. Um, would it be possible to do a comparison of the 3 Chrono Trigger releases and a story explanation of how Chrono Cross fits in? Now, here's the thing. I could compare the 3 releases really quickly and easily, and I could do that right now, and I will. But I just want to talk about Chrono Cross first really quick. Chrono Cross was a game I didn't actually enjoy. Much of that was because of the music. Part of that was because of the presentation. Part of that was because the game felt like a chore to play. I did not like the combat. I did not like how the leveling, if you could call it that system. It just didn't get to me. I didn't enjoy it. The end. I have been meaning to go back and give it another try now that time has passed, and now that I'm older and can understand and experience better. I just haven't gotten around to doing that. I still own it, obviously. Now, what I will give Chrono Cross lots of props for is the fact that its story was amazingly complex and in-depth, and so complicated that unfortunately I would probably do another 40-minute review in order to explain the story by itself. It was in-depth, and it was very well written, and I liked that. So that's gonna have to wait. I'm sorry. You know, I can do that if I ever get around to a Chrono Cross review, or a Chrono Cross story review maybe, because I could do that without having to replay the game. But as far as the 3 Chrono Trigger releases, the first release on the SNES was, of course, amazing. Really pushed the limits of the SNES, really pushed the limits of what it could do. There were some latency moments and there were some bugs, but they were understandable because, again, it was really pushing the engine. It was a game that was initially going to be designed for their next console generation, just like Secret of Mana was, and ended up getting pushed to the SNES instead. The PS1 port was terrible. The load times were atrocious, 30-ish seconds in some cases. A friend of mine and I were timing that. We did a side-by-side playthrough, which I used to do with my friends a lot. You know, I'd be playing Chrono Trigger and he'd be playing Chrono Trigger, and we're essentially racing, is what it is. There's no actual, you know, oh, I gotta win, because we're just doing it for fun. But you know, we were racing through the game, and he was playing the PS1 version, and I leapt to the lead so fast because of the delay. It was ridiculous, and the anime cutscenes were not put in very well. Not a lot of thought was put into them. Not a lot of effort was put into them, and it showed. So I thought it was a terrible port. I disliked it immensely. However, the DS release is fantastic. Everything they did about the DS release, they did right. Everything. I am absolutely amazed at how well the DS release came out, and I love that game on the DS, and nowadays when I replay it on the DS because it was fantastically done. The dialogue, the combat revisioning, the addition of the new control schema, the polishing of the graphics, you know, everything. All the new content. I loved the new content. It was very enjoyable. So definite props there. Let's see. Have I ever played the Hitman series? If so, what do you think about it? I have played the Hitman series. I don't enjoy it as much as, say, Assassin's Creed, personally. I like Assassin's Creed better for the story, for example. The sort of miniature pseudo-sandboxy nature of Hitman, though, is very interesting, and I like it. I like the fact that you can actually, you know, plan and or execute an assassination of a given target, basically however you have access to. And I think that's something that should be done more in that type of game. You know, giving you okay, you still have to get to point B over there, but you have the freedom to get to point B how you like. I like that type of game, and I like games that pulled it off well, and I think the Hitman series did that very well. The story, I have nothing good to say about the story, and that's the most kind thing I can say about it, so let's just move on. Where, personally, would I like to see Elder Scrolls 6 set, if they did it? Three options here, because I thought about this for a bit. Black Marsh would be fantastic. I would really love to see the Black Marsh and really get to explore what through description and through lore, is basically an alien world of a zone. Somerset Isles would be interesting. The politics of the area have always fascinated me, and it would be interesting to see, the architecture and the structure and all that. But ultimately, my real answer is all of Tamriel, which is ironic because that's what ESO is doing. But I would love to see Elder Scrolls 6 contain all of Tamriel, and that would be fantastic. Will I do a Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning review? Yes, I will. That's another game that's on the wish list that I'm waiting to on sale just because I know I don't have the time for it. But if I had had the time, I would have bought it new. I actually really enjoyed playing that game in the demo, and I think it's another one of those hidden gem games. And it's kind of funny. I'm going to comment on this real quickly. The reason I think it's a hidden gem game is because it's by EA. So that's automatic negative. I shouldn't say it's by EA. It's published by EA. So that's an automatic negative mark. But and yes, I am biased on that, and yes, I admit it. But I'm willing to ignore that, obviously, since I'm very in favor of the game. But the second problem was the fact that their ad campaign was terrible. Everything about the advertisements made it sound like it was an Age of Conan mixed with God of War clone, which doesn't sound interesting to me. In fact, that sounds the exact opposite of interesting to me, and I did not want to have anything to do with it. And then I played the demo, and I found out that it was more like a cross between Dragon Age and Elder Scrolls. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. And it actually had an in-depth background and an interesting story, and the graphics were nice, and the combat was amazing. I loved the combat engine. So, actually, yeah, I'm sorry, Elder Scrolls mixed with Dragon Age, mixed with Devil May Cry. And so, I would love to play through that game and do a proper review of it. Which tabletop RPGs do you play in GM? How often do you play? How long is the average session? I usually do D&D, Dungeons and Dragons. I've also done Cyberpunk, GURPS, and Friday Night Firefight is the other one. I always have to think about that one. But primarily D&D and Cyberpunk, and primarily D&D. I also don't play much. In fact, this came up just this last Tuesday. I sat down and thought out how many times I have played D&D, and I can count them on one hand. If I were to sit down and think about how many times I've GM'd D&D, I would have to a lot. I have done that many, many, many times over the years, ever since I was 12. So, moving on. And if you think I'm kidding, I'm not. I really have been doing that since I was 12. How often do I play? At the moment, our group has a weekly gathering Tuesdays. So we play every Tuesday. How long is the average session? It depends. We have to wait until children go to sleep in order to play because they're simply too disruptive. But once they are asleep, we play until people go to bed, which is usually 3-4 hours, which is unfortunate because that's nowhere near enough in order to really get into the swing of things, but it's nothing for it. Next question. Have I ever heard of or played The Dark Eye? If so, what do you think of it? I have not played The Dark Eye. I have heard of it. I would like to look into it more, but it's one of those things that's just not on the list. I hate to keep saying that. I only have so much free time, I only have so much time, period. And so I really wish I could do more and look into more. I enjoy video gaming as a medium, and I wish I could experience it more. And there's so many games that's just like, well. Do you like other games such as D&D or maybe Shadowrun is more to your liking? Shadowrun, I should have mentioned that earlier. I have played Shadowrun as well, and I did enjoy that. But I do prefer D&D as a format, and that's simply because as a GM, there's so much I can do with it. And somewhere in here, there's going to be a question. I'm going to go and answer it now. But someone asks, what version of D&D do you play? I play my own version, and that's probably not even going to be a surprise to anyone who's regularly watched my videos. My version is so modified from... It started with 3.5 with a little bit of 2.5 mixed in, and I have modified it over the years to the point now where I have to make a little cheat sheet for anyone who hasn't played under me GMing now. It's like, okay, here's how this works, and I will explain as I go. But my games tend to be very story-driven, very character-driven, and so I tend to focus more on that than the simple stats, and I am more likely to let a rule slide because it's in the interest of the story or making an interesting setting rather than enforcing it. And I'm also very against the concept of GM versus the player. I understand that concept. I understand why some people do that, but I don't. I am not GM versus the player. I am on your side. I am simply the game. I am here to be enjoyed, just like a video game is. So, how do you think they would have to handle games like Call of Duty and other shooters if they were to do that in sort of a holodeck fashion? Do you think they would create or implement some kind of age verification or censorship? Yes, I do think they would have to do that. They would have to implement some kind of system. I don't even know what off the top of my head. I can't come up with something right now, but there would have to be a way to regulate that. But the best way to do that, in my opinion, would be to make the game initially and from default, excuse me, romanticized, if you know what I mean. For example, if you were to be, if you in Mass Effect 3, the elusive man shoots himself in the head if you convince him to. Now, someone shooting themselves in the head is a very unpleasant business. In Mass Effect 3, he does this, there's a gunshot, and he falls over. That's what I mean by romanticized, and I'm in favor of that. There is no gore, there is no disgustingness. He shoots himself in the head, he falls over, you get all the impact of it, but none of the unpleasantness. And so I think they should do more of that. And this question, in case this question was not applying to holodecks and just video games in general, my answer still applies the same. I think more romanticizing rather than focusing on the gore would be a good thing for things like that, and maybe adding in the ability to turn on gore later, or making it an option, which I am fully in favor of, because that way the people who want to see giblets flying over the place can hit yes and turn it on, and the people like me who don't, who just want the violence without the gore, can do that. So as usual, I'm fully in favor of the options. What is my opinion on those reply videos, such as Reply Girl, who use their bosoms to get people to click their thumbnail? Now I'm going to be honest here, as I always am, I guess. I do actually make an effort to, make myself presentable for these. I do make sure my hair has been properly dealt with. I do freshly shave every time I do one of these videos, blah, blah, blah. And I do try to be at least decent, because I don't want you to see some bum just kind of randomly talking on YouTube. But I, I find it, what's a good word here? Disgusting? Is that a good word? Or perhaps insulting? There was one Reply Girl video I went and looked up when I was asked this question, and I'm going to try and demonstrate here. Unfortunately, I don't have two watermelons with me, but moving on. This girl was sitting kind of, let me really shove my chest out here, kind of like this, and the whole video was done like this. She didn't move, and she just had her chest right up here. It was actually kind of like this, and this was the whole video. Now, what she was saying, because I did actually listen, was disinteresting and poorly thought out. There was obviously no real thought process or analysis that had gone into it. It was just, here's my chest, please look at me and get my views. I cannot possibly be more against that. I think that's pandering. I think that's insulting. I think it's unnecessary. No thank you. So, that's my opinion there. Which of the Dragon Quest games do you recommend for someone who has never played them? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. In no particular order, and I'm not kidding. All of those are great games. If you really want to start a Dragon Quest and you've never played one before, 9 is probably a good place to start, or 4. But of those, picking a best one would actually be kind of difficult to do. Probably 7, in all honesty, possibly 8, or 4, 5, or 6, or 9. They're all great. That's part of the problem. So if you really want me to nail it down, I'm going to go ahead and say either 4 or 9. Have I ever played Sacrifice? No, I have not. So I unfortunately cannot comment on that. I apologize. Have I ever played the Black and White series? Yes, I have. I can't actually do a full review about it, but I can share my opinion really quick. Black and White is one of those games that's a great idea on paper and a great concept, and the gameplay just kind of failed to live up to that. Black and White could have been so much more than it was, and could have done so much more than it was, but it had so many, how do I put this? Getting the ideas from the paper, all the concepts that they had, which were great concepts, by the way. I want to stress this. They really had some excellent ideas with Black and White. Through the game to the players, somewhere along the line here, there was a flaw, or several flaws, and the whole process just kind of went downhill. And it didn't turn out the way it should have. And it didn't. And so there's this serious disconnect between the concepts and the actual game, and that was noticeable while playing it. And it's really a shame, because I still did enjoy playing it, but only a little bit, and the whole time I felt vaguely disappointed because I was really hoping for this when what I got was this. I like to call this Peter Molyneux syndrome, because he did that in Fable too. But have I ever played the Dungeon Keeper series? Yes, I have. Dungeon Keeper is a series I highly recommend to anybody who wants a little bit of pseudo Sims, pseudo dungeon builder, generally amusing gameplay. It's one of those games I'd probably call a popcorn game, because I don't think I'll ever be picking any of those series up again and playing them again. But they were funny, and they were interesting, and I liked building the little dungeon and setting up, the minions and the traps and all that. It was enjoyable. I liked it. And there's another game coming out soonish that's in a similar vein to that. but not really. It's by the team that did Magic. I can't even think of the name of it. And so I'm looking forward to that. If they did another Dungeon Keeper, I'll probably buy it, just like I have the previous ones. So, um, since I won't be surprised if you played all of the above, I'm sorry I didn't play Sacrifice. Would you like to see any remakes or continuations for any of the above? I guess I already answered that. A black and white done properly would be awesome. A new Dungeon Keeper would be good as long as they keep the elements of it. And I've never played Sacrifice, so I apologize. Um, I think I'm going to go ahead and pause here about an hour, and I'm about halfway through the questions. But I did promise that Xbox answer, so what I'm going to do is very next review, which I'm going to start recording right now, I'm going to go ahead and answer the Xbox question finally, first thing. So if you feel like continuing, feel free to watch the next one.